Imagine waking up in a new world, in a new body, and finding out you were the most hated character. Well, congratulations, because you are now the villainess. Now, it's no secret that everyone loves a good villain. Well, at least some of them. But I'm not talking Big Mom from One Piece or Lust from Fullmetal Alchemist when I'm referring to a villainess. Now, this category has been out for like a hot minute, so when I'm speaking about it, I'm speaking specifically about the villainess in print, specifically in manhwa and manga. So today we are going to be unpacking the villainess. So if you know, you know, and if you don't know, I'm hoping by the end of this video, I've convinced you to read or watch a Villainess series. Now, I keep saying villainess, 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 but what gives these girls this kind of bad reputation? Well, in short, these girls are usually violent, manipulative, angry, emotionally volatile, and abuse those of a lower status. Now, if it was the other way around and they were boys, they would probably be considered the male lead, the cold Duke of the North, the horrible emperor, but they are not. They are simply just villainess. And I can't lie, this is deeply rooted in misogyny and sexism. And I had to ask myself, are they villains or are they victims? And don't get me wrong, some of these girls are straight horrid. But most of the time, there is a reason that they are the way that they are. There's this phrase that a villain isn't born, they are created. And I think this is very important when we talk about a villainess. Usually these girls come from an affluent background. They have this privilege, but instead the pain that they are going through is inside. They're either ignored, abused, manipulated, misunderstood, and denied love. So with all of these things going on, they tend to react and act in a way fitting of a villainess. These things can be done to them by their family, by their fiance, by their object of their affection, and these characters, these villainesses, are not shown a lot of empathy. Now, combined with the fact that these girls are rich and have a lot of power to exert their abuse towards others, it is not a good combination. In the eyes of others, they are nothing more than villains. They are just a plot device that furthers the romantic plotline of a female lead and a male lead. These girls never get the guy, they are never good, and they are deserving of the death that they receive. Longtime romance reader, none of this stuff is new. It always happens for the main characters to have a happy ending. But when I'm talking about these villainess stories that are now coming out, they shine a new light on what it means to be a villainess. They are no longer the disposable fiance. They have depth and development and emotions and a voice, and we get to really experience that from their point of view. And that's why I love these series so much. Let's start from the beginning. How do these stories begin? From what I read, there are always two ways a villainous story begins. One, the main character is in a different world and they're either incapacitated or die, and they are sent and transmigrate to a new world, or they're reincarnated. Villains Are Destined to Die is an example of a main character transmigrating. Originally, our main character lived in modern-day Korea, but is then sucked into an otsumogane as the villainess Penelope, who is destined to die. Can she change her fate? You'll have to read and find out. Option two is that these characters live their lives and are able to regress back to the beginning to have a second chance at life. An example of a character regressing is the villainess turns the Hourglass. This story begins with the death of our main character Arya, who was manipulated into being the villain of the story by none other than her sister. But instead of actually dying, she ends up 10 years in the past and is given a second chance at life. So most of these stories are set in a lavish historical setting and confusing political history type things. And sometimes, if it's fantasy, there is a magical system in place. Now, these stories usually have a large array of characters, from maids to butlers to knights to kings to queens to dukes to merchants to mages. These characters are what make our story even more immersive. These are the characters that support our main cast, and some of them are like my favorite characters. We're heading to the big ballers, our main characters, and there are usually 3 main characters in a villainess story. First, the male lead. Now, this character usually has a big title to excuse their acts of terrorism against the world. They either have black hair and red eyes, or blonde hair or blue eyes, or some kind of combination of that. I consider there to be 2 kinds of male leads in these stories. One type of male lead I like to call the villain. Now, this male lead is abusive, manipulative, and all around a terrible person. They are a terrible character to the villainess and to those around them. Another type of male lead I like to call the bystander. Now, the bystander male lead is usually forcefully engaged to the villainess, so they resent and they ignore the villainess. So they're basically bystanders to the villainess's crimes, conveniently, until their true love, the female lead, enters the story. Now, sadly, these male leads can and are usually redeemed. And after our main character either transmigrates or they go back in time and regress, the male lead, even though how terrible and horrible they were to them in the other life, they fall in love and they change. I hate these kinds of stories. I hate them. Do not go back to that man. Do not go back to that man. So I said these male leads can be redeemed, but there is another option. They can also be recasted. The recast male lead is not the original male lead, so instead of being redeemed, those characters are pushed to the side and we have another character kind of show up as the new male lead, and they are the object of the villainess's affection. This is my favorite option, obviously. The next main character is the female lead. So we have the villainess, we have the male lead, and now we have the female lead. Now, the female lead is the main character. They are beautiful, they are kind, they are special. If there's some type of magic in that world, they're an expert at it. They are saints. They are everything good in the world, everything that a villainess is not. They are the heroes, they are the girls deserving of love from the male lead. Now, the female lead character is often the victim of the villainess, which then in turn sets off the events of the demise of the villainess. There are numerous types of female leads, but from what I've read, they're either the victim, that woe is me, all these bad things happen to me, and they play the victim on purpose to win favor with the male lead. Or sometimes they are literally just innocent girls. They can't help it that they're the main characters in this story. They can't help it. That's the way that they were written. A villainous story that I think has a complex female lead is Kill the Villainess. It's about a character that transmigrates into the villainess's body but wants to go home and is willing to do anything, and I mean anything, to go back. But there is a secret character. Now, this character only appears in transmigration or reincarnation stories, and they are called the OG. They are the OG villainess. Now, when our main character, usually a woman in their 20s, either living a terrible life or they're poor or they're stressed out and they die, they end up going to a new world, into a new body. That body is not theirs. The soul that inhabited that body, where does it go? So a lot of villainess stories do this in a lot of different ways, and it's really interesting to see. Now, I've seen a lot of discourse over the OG. I've seen a lot of conversations about how people feel bad, and honestly, I feel bad too. I could only imagine the people that I wanted to love me do end up loving me when that's not even me. That's not even me inside that body. So they just didn't like me. And like, I get it, sometimes they're bad, but it's often it can be very emotionally devastating to them. Now, a lot of things that I said doesn't necessarily have to be 100% true with every story. These are just reoccurring things that I see with the villainess stories that I've read in the past. Nothing's more traumatic, I imagine, than appearing in a different world, knowing you are destined to die. So of course these characters respond to this trauma with trauma responses. And these are usually the ways that our villainess kind of goes through the story. So if you're unfamiliar, again, I'm not a mental health professional, but these are trauma responses that real people go through. And you can definitely see it in these stories. So we're gonna go over them. It is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. The first one that we're gonna go over is fight. Now, I love these girls. I am a revenge lover. I live for revenge. I love to see those who cause suffering to others to suffer. That's just my cup of tea. Usually is when a main character regresses and goes back into the past because they were wronged in their lifetime, so they're going back to get their revenge, and they do everything with all the knowledge that they have gathered. They use this information to plot on others. In I'm Queen in This Life, our main character committed the most heinous crimes for the sake of love, but is ultimately betrayed by him and her own sister. Luckily, she's given another chance, and this time she won't live for love, she's living for revenge. The next response is fawn. Now, fawn is when someone appeases and pleases others around them to avoid harm. So to avoid harm, our main character, whether they came in through another world or they were returned to the past, our main character becomes the kind, thoughtful main character and tries their best to turn over a new leaf. If they know that if they continue on the path that they're in, doing wicked and evil things, they will die. So instead, they try to be the best person that they can be. So they become the thoughtful, sweet, kind main character. A good example of this is How to Win Over My Husband. When our main character awakens as a villainess who's destined to die by her own husband's hands, she's given another chance to show everyone, especially her husband, that she is not the villain. Our next villainous trauma response is flight. Now, these are the girls that get the head, they get the bread, and they leave. So these main characters often believe that if they leave the storyline or don't interact with the same characters or just don't get involved, that they are saved from a destined death. Sometimes they plan on doing this and they end up not doing it. That happens a lot of the time. But there are the girlies that do actually leave. And there are kind of two ways for a girly to be able to leave. First is the entrepreneur. Now, this character has information and knowledge from the future. They have knowledge from another world, so they know what makes bank. They know how to earn money. And of course, in this world, in any world, money rules everything. So let's say our main character does not have the entrepreneur skills that they need, and they still want to leave. The other option is the man route. This is where they find a new man unrelated to the main storyline to get a new one. So they get a new man to kind of exit from the main storyline. Now, their new man can be like super scary and feared. They can have a bigger title. They can just be irrelevant to the plot. Anything to get them out of the situation. An example of a girl boss is the villainess's stationery shop. When our main character wakes up in the body of a villainess who is only a minor character destined to have a tragic death, she decides to pack up, leave, and open up shop. And for our final trauma response, it is freeze. This kind of villainess has no idea what to do, so they end up going about their regular schmegular lives, making the wildest decisions imaginable, and wondering why the plot is not following the original plot line. Girl, because of you! These are also the girls that try to make do in the situation that they're in. Why fight or run away when you can just relax? In The Perks of Being a Villainess, our main character awakens in the body of an infamous villainess named Deborah. And instead of getting upset, she realizes the lavish lifestyle she can live if she continues to be the villainess. Can she continue ignoring the other characters and live a stress-free life? Who knows? Whimsy, if you know the recipe, you know the formula for every villainess story, why do you keep reading them? Why do you keep staying up to 3 in the morning reading 100+ chapters? No villainess story is exactly alike. Every so often, I find one that does something just so different or so interesting or so exciting that I'm drawn back into that kind of trope. And as I said earlier, I love the Villainess. I think this character is very important, and I feel like it deconstructs what it is to be a leading lady in a romance story. And they give villainesses their own voice, their own power, their own emotions, their own point of view. They are not just minor characters. They're not just the other woman. They can be the main character, and main characters can be villainesses. And sometimes people do deserve a second chance. There's nothing wrong with being a sweet, kind person. There's nothing wrong with the female leads. There's something wrong with the way that romance stories are written. I think the villainous story just shakes things up, and honestly, that's what I really like to see. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening to me rant about villainesses and talk about how I feel about them. And I appreciate you getting to this point of the video. And if you have any other recommendations, please put it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe because I have so many other videos that I'm thinking of and want to talk about. So I'll see you guys next time.